I'll call it the state of the game, where if you heard my tease before we went to break and go, wait a minute, you're talking about this match between Scottie and Rory against Brooks and Bryson, and somehow this is morphing into a threat on the state of the game. I actually do think the discussion deserves that platform, that significance, because the announcement comes out, Scottie Scheffler, right? And all the things that Scottie is. He's undoubtedly number one on the PGA Tour. He is number one in the official World Golf Rankings, even though we all agree the official World Golf Rankings don't reflect the entirety of the game as they should. But nonetheless, for what it is, he is number one in that regard, too. You got Rory McIlroy for all that he is. Rory McIlroy, interestingly enough, it could be debated with Bryson DeChambeau in terms of if he's not number one most popular golfer in the world, then he's number two. And number one is Bryson, or he's number two, depending upon what audience you're talking to, and in some cases a given week. And then you got Bryson. For all the things that Bryson is right now, Bryson redefined himself, and I don't think it was because Bryson changed who he was, although he said he matured, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's because Bryson found vehicles to channel his personality so that people actually came to know who he really was. Do you understand what I'm saying in terms of the difference there? Bryson changed some things. There's no doubt about it. But I think at its core, we're seeing Bryson for who Bryson actually is versus who we thought Bryson was. Now, who we thought Bryson was at that time, by and large, was defined not setting aside his own actions in part in that regard, but because of what Brooks Koepka did in terms of Brooksy and the way that he responded and all the rest. And back in the day when all that was happening, I was one of those that said I thought a lot of it was just schoolyard bullying. Well, now Brooks and Bryson are on the same team. And I put it in that phrase because I'm not just simply talking about this match that's been set up for later on this year. But the question is, what does it mean? And I'm not criticizing the event. If they want to do the event, I'm all for it. I think it's going to be entertaining. I actually wish that there were more players on each side, respectively. Instead of just 2 and 2, I wish it was at least, say, 6 and 6. If you couldn't get to a full 12 and 12, which I understand. But, but I'm not going to complain with what it is. But a broader question, philosophically placed then, is what does it mean? Is this somehow a shot across the bow of golf's establishment, right? At least from I feel like from the Rory McIlroy perspective, when I say is this a shot across the bow. Because there are stronger and stronger whispers that there is a philosophical divide that manifests itself in terms of power and position in the game of golf. And I say whispers because it's starting to show up in media discussions, in print, if you please, even though that's a different connotation now than it would have been just a few years ago when you say something's in print. A recent article I saw in SI openly discussed the fact that Rory McIlroy, who, for whatever reason, left the board, then decided when Webb Simpson said, no, I'll step down for Rory McIlroy to come back on, and then the board said, no, we can't do that because of procedures. Okay, which procedures? The procedures that put Tiger on the board seemingly forever? Or the way that Patrick Cantlay came on the board? Those procedures? But whatever. It's their board, so, their ball, their bat, they make the rules. So Rory was not put back on the board, which was a clear sign of things that were happening. He was put on a subcommittee, this subcommittee to negotiate with PIF. And Rory has said consistently that he thinks there should be a world tour, that he wants the world of golf to come back together. My summation. But this SI article said that Cantlay, Jordan Spieth, and Tiger have formed this power block because the players now have control with the board, because it's about numbers, as anybody would tell you with any board anywhere. Ultimately, decisions in politics are defined by numbers, and they have the numbers. And that the philosophy, as I would encapsulate it, is that allegedly the powers do not want players who left and got LIV money to be able to walk back and compete on the PGA Tour. The way I would phrase it, I suppose, would be to say they can't have their cake and eat it too. So this philosophy is such that that is the challenge that these articles are alleging is actually happening behind the scenes in golf. So you've got people like Rory who are saying, guys, we have to do what's good for golf, and we have to bring this game back together, whereas you have powerful individuals that are going, first thing we're going to do is what's good for all of us. Then we'll figure out the rest. So that there are strong doubts starting to circulate in terms of what the long-term probability will be of bringing the game back together and how it will define itself and how it will manifest itself. And so it's fascinating to me in terms of the significance of what this means. If it is about building walls, then the question has to be asked about, for example, on the LIV side, just as an example, how long do you remain patient, right? How long do you engage in a discussion before you get to the point in saying, no, it doesn't seem like there's a pathway here that really is something that we're comfortable with, or feeling like there's equity there. And if that happens, is that a negotiating position, or is that a thought that once you build the walls that someone on the outside of the walls is going to go their merry way? What would lead someone to believe that it wouldn't ignite another round of scorched earth, right? That if, and this is going back some time when we heard that, well, the PIF was going to put $1 billion into the PGA Tour. What happens if that $1 billion is reinvested in attracting new players to their tour? What are you left with? Right? So it's that complexity of what this means for the state of the game. We're hearing time and again that television ratings are going down on the tour. Now, it's a reflection of many things, including the status of cable television in the industry at large. There's different ways that people are consuming the game now, and we're told, well, there's that's up, and total consumption in terms of how that's measured. I don't know what the exact measurement is, so that I'm not going to try to claim what it is. But we know what the traditional old measures were, and that's changing. How much of that is based upon who's playing and where, the force of personalities, and then you come down to the fact that this is happening, this event, the fact that it is happening, and is it a shot across the bow by Rory? I ask again. But an even more intriguing position for me is Scottie's involved. So you've got the guy who unequivocally is at the peak on the PGA Tour. He is number one by all various measures, not to mention the performance categories that he's number one. But he's just number one in every way. He's undoubtedly player of the year. There's no doubt about that now with everything. He holds their FedEx Cup. He won for the second consecutive year the flagship event, the Players. He's a major champion this year. All the wins that he did, everything that made Scottie Scheffler who and what he is. He literally is the poster boy for the PGA Tour. Yet he's a part of this event. So I'm not sure how it went down. I'm not sure if they approached Rory first and Rory called Scottie and said, hey, do you want to do this? I don't know whether the producers did it. I don't know how it went down. I'm not claiming to. All I know is that Scottie Scheffler is part of it. So Bryson and Brooks and Rory and Scottie are giving us what the world wants. Another opportunity to see four of the best, each of them with their own distinct position in the game and personalities, going head-to-head at a time of year where there's not much else going on in the world of golf. Is this the modern version of the old skins game back in the day? I think the significance of this event, like I said, we haven't had time to talk about this since the announcement came out and the last time we were on with you. Because I can't remember what day it came out last week. It might have been Wednesday, and I was traveling. This Wednesday, I'll be traveling again. But I just think it has a lot of significance. So, Dom, I'll kick it back to you again because you'll be in touch with, I think, with your setup this morning. I know you had some technical difficulties. I am curious what people are saying on our discussion board about these thoughts and concepts, because this event, while I'm really looking forward to it, and I think it's going to be really fun for all the reasons that I just laid out, I think it has a direct reflection on what's going on inside the game right now, and what golf has never wanted its dirty laundry put out in the line, ever. But what's happening now is that you've got these media entities, just like that article I was just explaining to you, where because you have human beings involved and because there's so much focus on the top players in the game, those that are kind of middle tier or lower, they know they can hear they're part of their respective tours on either side, and they're starting to speak out to what's going on. And that's why this news is starting to get out there. It's moving very slowly because the establishment is trying to keep things as contained as they possibly can. They're calling it negotiations and what have you, and it's probably related to that, in fairness, in some part, but not in its entirety. But now this stuff is starting to get out there. And so I just find it to be absolutely fascinating. And I think this event, the fact that it's happening, directly connects with, you can tell I'm here in the city. I'm not sure if you heard that big horn. Somebody's mad at somebody on the roads. That this event is happening, I think, is a reflection of a lot more than simply entertainment. And I find it all fascinating. What, if I may, Dom, what are you hearing from the people?
Yeah, it's a complex mess. The question of the day is, will you watch this event? Will you watch this LIV, quote unquote, LIV PGA Tour event in December? It is like you said, sort of the match, quote unquote, style. Same producers, rumored to be on TNT, the whole deal. 83% are saying yes, they're going to watch this event, man. We do have a lot of things coming in. Again, this is a very complex issue that is incredibly layered, and we've broken that down a fair bit on this program over the last 12 months or so. We've got folks making comments like the SSG has approved these things. Something needs to start happening. If nothing happens, will Rory go to LIV? ? I wonder how John Rahm is starting to feel about all of this being left out. The intimation there being, I believe, that John Rahm thought when he went, that might be sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back, and then that would sort of bring everyone together, and that hasn't happened yet.
So. Dom, I don't think that's what that comment is referencing. I think that comment is referencing simply that John Rahm's looking at this going, I'd like to be a part of that event. See, that's why I was saying I wish this event had more than 2 and 2. Right? I wish it was at least 3 and 3, and I really wish it was at least 6 and 6. Right? And I think this is where, when you look at an understanding of possibilities, and this is what I think happens in particularly in negotiations, when sides start to build up walls. My interpretation. Instead, this could have been an opportunity where the organization said, you know what? We can make this huge. We'll co-produce it. Call it an olive branch if you want to, or is that too close to violating some of the positions of the people that want to take a hard line? Don't know, but otherwise, you could have made this an absolutely huge event. Have the two organizations come together. Doesn't mean that you've signed any new agreements. You're just saying, I'm going to give a release to my players. You give a release to your players. Maybe they do something in terms of how they work sponsorships and, because everything comes down to money, right? Blah, blah, blah. But nonetheless, it gives them an opportunity to have an event that could have been really cool and really fun and included those big names, including Jon Rahm. So anyway, that's my interpretation of that message that you got. What else you got?
Derek writes, this will be epic. Paul is saying this could be a strategy for Piff trying to make a play to purchase the European Tour. Or the DP World Tour, I should say. There's comments coming in about TGL and where that league is in this spectrum of this mess. How does that play a role, if anything?
Well, TGL is in partnership with the PGA Tour. So there's not really a mystery in terms of where they sit in this whole spectrum.
I think my fear, Matt, my concern with all this, and I think I told Matt this yesterday, the day before we were talking on the phone, is the anger coming from the fans on both sides. When is that going to reach a point where people have had enough? In other words, I think there's a lot of people that are supportive of LIV and they're sort of angry or frustrated with the PGA Tour and vice versa. I think there's a lot of fans of the PGA Tour that are angry and or frustrated with LIV and how it's played out. There's not a lot of playing nice, or it feels like there's not a lot of playing nice going on. And my overarching general concern is simply, what are we doing to the sport on the professional side? Recreationally, I think we've all seen in the last 3 years an incredible boom in the sport. I think generally speaking, there's just more people interested and involved in playing golf, whether that's in a simulator environment or on a real golf course. But the professional side, watching professional golf and the interest level in watching, whether it's LIV or the Tour or whatever, I feel like that's waning. I feel like that's the fan base is getting irritated on both sides. And my general overarching concern, Matt, is at what point do we need to worry about that? At what point is it a problem that the ratings might be starting to dip across the board for LIV, for Tour, for you name it? And at what point are the fans going to abandon? Are they going to abandon? Because I feel like on some cases, I mean, think about it. If they're up against football, right? Like right now, towards when the seasons start to cross over, at what point is the anger from the fan base going to be like, man, I forget it. I'm done with this. I'm just going to just go all in on football or all in on baseball or whatever it is that they're into that they might have been splitting time with. Now they're just going to say, this is getting annoying. Forget it. I'm just going to watch this game over here instead. I mean, how realistic of a comment is that? Is this a real risk, Matt? Or am I just too invested?
We've seen that flow and ebb in other sports. We've seen it in football. We've seen it in baseball. We've seen it in hockey, where when you end up having discussions that are so focused on, how else do I phrase it other than the rich getting richer, it turns off the fan base. And I even talked about that with Scottie Scheffler Scottie Scheffler won this past season in excess of $62 million. Okay, so it's a lot of money. But with professional athletes, money ends up for us, for the great unwashed, it ends up becoming like monopoly money anyway. So how vested do we become in knowing that the purse at a LIV event is what, 25 million or whatever it is, or the purse at the Players is 20 million? Does that really move us as fans anymore? Right? Does that really cause us to pay attention because the purse is big? or that somebody won a lot of money, or that an investment group, is going to put in billions of dollars. Does that do anything to us from a fan's perspective? And this is what my whole message is with this whole thing, is understanding what do the fans want. And ultimately, you have to ask the honest question of, do you care? As an organizations, plural, do they care really what the fans want? They're always included in the discussions, sponsors and players and fans. And okay, why? Right? Is the fan base that critically important? You would suggest and say, well, yeah, because even though golf has never had great, for example, television ratings as compared to, as we're talking about football, for example, it's not even close. In some cases, it's 10% of. But that 10% is the creme de la creme. It's the people that have the disposable income, the assets to invest in luxury cars, vacations, financial services, et cetera, and keep on going down the line. So that's that coveted demographic that they're trying to reach. And honestly, if you shaved off mass audiences from television, the percentage of that coveted demographic is pretty much the same, right? When you actually shave it down. So the golf, you could say from a viewership standpoint, from a demographic standpoint, the golf viewership doesn't have any fat. Cuts right to the people that these types of companies are trying to reach. But I think it's to me, it's a reflection of where we are in society, right? For example, this year it becomes acute because we're in an election year. And there's the belief in any time that you have an election, any time that you have political bodies engaged in a philosophical war against each other, the mentality is that if you're not with us, you're wrong. Start on that presumption. If you're not with us, you're wrong. And the mentality is that if you're with us, you have to adopt the entirety of the philosophy that that particular group holds in all regards and in all extensions. And those groups are always controlled by the extremes. That's just the nature of it. So my belief is that when it comes to politics, and even relative to the context of this discussion, that the vast majority of us exist someplace in the middle. You're on different sides, perhaps, of where the spectrum is, but the vast majority of people are not extremist on one side or the other. They may lean towards one side or the other, but they discern issues based upon their conscience and their intellect, and not based upon a platform or philosophy. And so when it comes to what's going on right now, I think the risk is that if the overriding concern is greed and control, and in some cases insecurity, and even, dare say, a form of revenge, that's a very, very risky position to take. And it's very important that you keep those agendas tucked away someplace and try to structure a deal where they're not revealed. Unfortunately for them, what's happening right now is that even in a world where the true stories of what's going on try to be buried behind other agendas and PR campaigns, information is going to emerge. And if that information emerges, now you've got to ask the serious question, at what point do people start to throw up their hands and go, you know what? You know why I'm here? I'm here to be entertained. I'm here for fun. I'm not here to make sure that all of you guys collectively get the biggest checks you possibly can and then wow us with the sums of money that are paid out either through purse or through contracts or earnings or bonuses or anything else. That's not why I do it. I'm not engaged in football because of tonight the Jets are playing and what Aaron Rodgers is going to get paid this season. I don't care. It's a disconnect with the average people. So long-winded answer to the question that you asked, Dom, but they are real concerns, and I'm always suspect as to how and when the wants and the needs of the fan base are truly being attended to, not to mention the charitable base of the game, a game that, contributes $4 billion a year to charity. The vast majority are you people back at your clubs, not at this grand level. So I do sense a growing disconnect between golf at its highest competitive levels and the rest of the game, which, as you said, is very, very healthy.
Yeah, my concern is just the long-term future of the sport on a professional side in general, like just in general health. And I am concerned about that. I think it's quite clear from the comments that Jay Monahan, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, made at the Tour Championship or in advance of, that one thing I feel like we could sort of say with certainty, Matt, is nothing is going to change in 2025. There's going to be discussions, and they're working towards something positive, potentially working towards something together. But whatever it is that they're working towards, I think it's clear that it's not going to happen next year, which means all of the entirety of next year, which is the launch of TGL, which was supposed to launch this year, and they had some issues, and now they're launching next year. LIV and the PGA Tour and their separation currently, how it exists with their schedules and everything else, and the issues with the world rankings and the fact that at least currently really all these players are only playing in the 4 major championships together. I think that's what next year is going to look like, identical to this year. And we'd have to just sort of cross our fingers for January of 2026. And as a golf fan, I don't love that. And it sort of scares me just because the fear that I have, Matt, stems from the fact that, and I'm an idiot, okay, especially when it comes to business. So a lot of the things that you're talking about and we hear about and I read about are just going right over my head. I just don't understand a lot of this crap. But my biggest fear is that they're not going to be able to solve this. And I also don't see a solution that like is a winning solution. It all seems like a murky mess. And that's where my fear stems from, because it just seems like there's not a very good path forward right now. And there's a lot of anger. And I think you used the word revenge more than once when you were talking. And that's concerning. Well, that it's concerning because then you're talking about like personal issues getting involved, vendettas getting involved, people getting upset about this, that, or the other, and not taking into account things on a macro level, not taking into account fans. And that stuff scares me. It just makes, because I love golf. I love all of it. And I want it to be healthy. And I also feel like for the sake of history, right? Like you want to watch Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes for history, for context, for legend. That's what you want to watch. And so I want to see Brooks and Rory and Scottie. I want to see them playing against each other for the sake of history as often as possible, because the best players in the world right now are not all playing at the same time for whatever the reason. And the more years we lose of that, the more it screws up history in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah. To all your points, well taken, well said. That's what it comes down to, and that's why with this announcement, and to the question that you asked today of will you watch, and I'm amongst those that's very much looking forward to it. Very much looking forward to it. I think this is about much more than just that event. I think the creation of this event is about much more than just that event. I mean, if you look at the course of history, new world orders were concepts that were hatched always outside of the establishment. And I do think that there's a lot of risk in what's happening in and around the game right now, and again, there's various ways to define risk, but in this context, I mean it from a fan engagement standpoint. And 83+%. What's the percentage right now, Dom, of people who said they're definitely going to watch it?
85% right now.
85%.
I'm in that 85%. I can't wait to watch.
85% are saying they're on board with this thing right now. 85%. Now, there's going to be a percentage that just like, hey, lighten up, it's just about good entertainment, so I'm in. But I think this is, and I'm not saying the 85% are voting because they think it means something more too. I'm just saying, in my personal opinion, I think this establishment of this event has great meaning, really great meaning.